Our topic tonight will center on downtown Edmonton's revitalization and the impacts of events and festivals in the downtown core. To bring this topic to life tonight, we're very pleased to host an interview-style format with two very influential Edmontonians. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Brad Ferguson and Omar Mouallem.
Thanks, Urban Systems, for organizing these talks that you do. And thank you all for coming out. I love living in a city. I love living in a world where so many people come out just to hear two guys talk about things and get people thinking about their surroundings and their city in a different way. I hope that we're going to have a stimulating conversation. I think we're going to have a very stimulating conversation. If not, that's what the Yellowhead Brewery is for. But I'm not overly concerned because we have Brad Ferguson's brain to pick tonight. Now, Brad, my first impression of you was, I think, what a lot of people had as a first impression of you as CEO of the EEDC. That was as a little bit of a firebrand, and that's because shortly after you took the CEO role, you were asked to put Edmonton on the reputation-o-meter, and you gave it a 1.5 out of 10. So, 3 years later, almost to the month, what's the score?
That's funny. Shame on you for remembering that, first of all.
Sorry, I used my cognitive powers.
I was in front of City Council, and Amarjeet Sohi said, Mr. Ferguson, how would you rank our brand? And I kind of went through the political thing, which is, do I give it a 10, because that's what he wants to hear, or do I give it to him what I think it is? And I said 1.5, and he looked at me and he said, why not 2? And I said, because I think that would be overambitious, Amarjeet.
Well, what was the extra 0.5 for? Was that for our green onion cakes? Like what got that?
I thought there were parts of the city maybe I hadn't really explored yet. So
okay.
I didn't want to downplay anybody, but it was a really interesting conversation. And at that point in time, which is about 3 years ago, we really hadn't found the momentum and found the energy and that rhythm and that pulse that I think a lot of people are feeling today. And you ask, what is it out of 10 today? I'd say it's only a 3. I think we've got a long way to go. But we've also been 100% more improvement than where we were 3 years ago. And I think that's a kudos to a lot of the kind of the community building activities that have gone on in the city, not just the big screens in the sky, but there's so much more community and civic engagement than it was 3 years ago, that I would give it 100% improvement over where we were.
So what about the big cranes in the sky? Like that is an indication of the downtown revitalization, for lack of a better term. What role does the downtown revitalization play in the improvement of Edmonton's global reputation?
It's very visible. It's a lot of steel and a lot of beautiful buildings that are, I think the world and certainly parts of Canada are starting to wake up and say, why is there $5.5 billion of construction going on in this, really this city that is geographically quite remote? A lot of people don't know a lot of things about us, and so they're intrigued. So it gets people's attention. For Edmontonians, it raises self-esteem, and they say, for years we've just battled this horrific downtown. Parking lots 15, 20 years ago to, not necessarily having a full plan to really some parts of downtown really coming to life and capturing the imaginations of people. So I think it plays a huge role. I don't think we're there yet at all. I think the steel is the easy part. It's the stuff in between that's going to be some of the magic that happens over the
right,
next
because we've had this steel before. That's what the 70s were all about, and the 60s as well, right? We've had this many cranes in the sky, if not more.
Yeah, I think 1976 was the start of the last really big boom to about 81, 82.
And that didn't necessarily turn out great for Edmonton's downtown in the long term. So how can we do it right this time?
Well, a lot of things did go well during that period. Commerce Place was the last building to be built, and what happened was that was not based on net new demand. All the government went into Commerce Place, and it glutted all the B and C class office space. So what happened was that was the last building to be built, and we sat for 15 years trying to get rents back up as the B and C class buildings, suffered for quite a while. And now they've had a good run, and we may be dangerously close to doing it again. And I think that'll be one of the interesting things we determine and look at over the next 4 or 5 years.
That's what everybody loves to hear.
Well, I'm going to give it to you, Frank.
Yeah,
I'm not
no,
gonna-
thank you for giving it to us, Frank.
I mean, you just gave me one free beer.
It's not me. It is the good people at Urban Systems. So in speaking about downtown's role in the reputation, growing up in Alberta, in northern Alberta, Edmonton was such a magical place to me. But that was because the reputation hinged on other things like Wayne Gretzky, the championship games, West Edmonton Mall. Our father's generations were probably drawn to the city because it was fast growing, because it was a promising place career-wise, in spite of its lazy downtown. So what has changed in the world to make millions of dollars in investment in downtown, and downtown itself so vital to the city's image, or to a city, any city's image?
Well, I think we're unique here. So I have to separate us from a lot of other cities. You know, what's changed, and it's interesting, is you've got huge global demand for energy, food, fiber, water, you know, healthcare, education, the things that we have here. And you know, we wouldn't be building the stuff downtown without just this massive global demand, whether it starts in 3 years from now, whether it starts in 30 years from now, or 60 years. It is a force in the world today. And there's only so many places. I think there's like 6 countries in the world that are net producers and net exporters of agricultural products. We're one of them right here in Alberta, not just Canada, just Western Canada. And, you know, that's the agricultural side, the energy side, all those things. That's what's drawn so much international investment here, interest here, and people. But you know, back in the 70s, people came here for opportunity.
Yeah.
People are coming here today for opportunity. It's not because there's mountains, not because there's ocean or anything like that. People come here for opportunities, and we continue to provide that here. And it's kind of one of the neat things about this city. It's hardworking, hard playing, and for a young person, 18 to 36, that moves here, or with their family or wife or kids or whatever, there's a lot of opportunity for people to move ahead.
So is improving the core, is revitalizing the core more of a question of how to keep people here?
People have come here for opportunity and to have influence on their community. Those are the two big things. And as a result, that 18 to 36-year-old cohort moves here in droves. They want to live downtown. They don't want to necessarily own cars and a whole bunch of fixed assets. They want to live close to where they work. They want to LRT it. They want to bike or whatever it happens to be. And that starts to densify the downtown core. And companies that want to locate, or that are here, even they're out in the burbs, they're starting to want to locate downtown because they want to be closer to
It
their
sounds
people.
like essentially it's about competing for talent.
It's all about talent. Like you know, one of the funny things people say, you know, why don't we go attract Google here? I'm like, well, I could spend all your tax money and I can go out and try to get Google here. It's never going to happen. But if we can bring the talent here, start a couple of little really good IT companies that, you know, are into search or whatever it happens to be, then Google looks at us and go, you know, there's a lot of talent there. We're going to go acquire some of those. We're going to build a base, and that's how you get Google here. It's not it's not that traditional way of economic development. And really, I call it a waste of taxpayers' money for years and years. People going around the world trying to attract all these big companies here. It doesn't work that way. It's all about talent.
So that's business, and so that's economics. But what about festivals? We are a festival city. What about the events that we hold in downtown? What role do they play in the revitalization, and vice versa? What role does the revitalization play in attracting large scale events to the city? You were a big booster of the Red Bull Crashed Ice event. Maybe we can use that as a bit of an example.
Yeah, well, that was a good one.
That was a good party. That was a good party.
It was like 6 months ago. So about 6 months ago. So it was about in the middle of March, and we needed a big winter event that was that, again, 18 to 36-year-old. It's a little extreme sport. It was a little untraditional. We needed people to come in and interact with their downtown, interact with their city, and just do something pretty unique. So, you know, compliments to the City of Edmonton. We collectively, us and like our tourism department and them, they went out and they got it and they attracted it. And they have 100,000 people in the downtown core, you know, on one night. 70,000 below the river bank, 20,000 on Jasper Avenue, and 5,000 in Churchill Square. And it was fantastic, you know. And those things allow people to interact with their city. You get emotionally connected with your city. It's fun. Your city's taking a risk. You're doing some fun things. They're going out. They're spending money in the bars and the restaurants and interacting with other Edmontonians. And that's what creates a energy in a city that you really can't put a quantitative measure on. It's just this thing you feel when you have it, and you feel it when you don't have it. And so festivals do a couple things. They allow us to program that downtown core, our river valley, and allows Edmontonians to interact. But our catchment area is Grand Prairie, Fort McMurray, Fort St. John, Lacombe, Red Deer, Regina, Saskatoon. And what we want is, we're not an international destination, but we're a great regional destination. So 52 weeks a year, we want people coming here, spending money, staying in hotels, partying with friends, all that kind of thing. So those festivals and events are what we call kind of 52 fish hooks. And because you need lures, you need things to bring people here for they can spend money and stimulate the economy and experience Edmonton, and maybe they move here someday.
What will it take then to attract another event of that magnitude? I mean, 100,000 people in downtown for a weekend like that, and then televised around the world as well. That's huge. But it was only a weekend. So how do we build off of that, and how do we do that again?
Well, hopefully, first of all, it's not a one-time event. It's not a one-trick pony. So it goes back to Quebec City, and then hopefully we have it for some successive years after. But there are other events that we need to go after, and what makes us or allows us to win, and we win by the way probably 3 times more than any other city in Canada for those things that we go out and bid on.
What do you mean we win 3 times more?
Well, it's competitive.
Yeah.
You have to put a proposal together. You have to get the community aligned. You have to have your organizing committees. You have to have a great tourism group. You have to have a great, facilities like conference centers or downtown arenas or whatever they happen to be. And then you put that package together and you go propose something in order for you to attract these groups to come here and put on their event.
And you're saying Edmonton has a higher success rate?
We've been incredibly successful. Why? Because the mayor's office, our organization, the airport, the chamber, the community groups, we've all been aligned in these pursuits. And that unified voice and that force as we push forward has been wildly successful for us. You start breaking up that group and it gets political sometimes and it gets territorial sometimes. What other cities experience, you can't put a unified voice forward. And if you're the organizing group like Red Bull or whatever, you see through that. And you're like, I'm not going to go there because they don't have their act together. And I'm not sure I'm going to get the organizing committee. And I'm not sure I'm going to get all the local hockey teams and things like that coming together. But Edmonton has been so successful operating as a unit. And if we keep that momentum going, we've got a great 5-10 year run ahead of us.
I mean, it's easy to think of the ones that have been unsuccessful, like the Commonwealth Games, the 2017 Expo. What are the examples of the more successful bids that we've made? Would the Winter Cities International Winter Cities Conference be an example of that?
If we go back in history, the 2001 World Track and Field Championship was a great success here. A lot of people don't remember that. There's a lot of new Edmontonians. I think
was that when the UK media coined us Deadmonton?
That's exactly right.
That was exactly it. Okay.
Yeah, very memorable for you, obviously. I see.
Yeah, I was.
I was thinking of other things, but
yes.
And then about 2005, 2006, the World Masters Games, and I'm not sure if everybody remembers it, but the World Masters Games actually, pound for pound, was probably one of the biggest events we've ever had, because you take these kind of weekend warrior athletes from every country in the world. They all descend here. They all come with family and friends. And they eat and they drink and they stay in hotels and they go to all the different people's events. That is probably the biggest economic impact we could ask for out of an event, versus like a Commonwealth Games, which is very prestigious. It gets our name out there. It's very good for international media. But the athletes come, they're too damn serious sometimes, and and there isn't the real economic impact that comes out of it. I'd rather have, like, I think next summer is the Gay and Lesbian Aquatic Games. Like, that is a fantastic event because they all come, they're going to have a great time.
And we're hosting that.
We're hosting that.
Really?
It's
okay.
Yeah, it's bars and restaurants will be full. People are going to go out and they're going to watch the event, but the athletes themselves become part of the economic drivers. And I really like those type of events. And the Red Bull one's a good example of that as well.
That's awesome. But I wonder if there are any municipal policies, bylaws related to land use or planning, maybe. Are there barriers within that realm? Barriers to bringing events to downtown, and is there any way that we can improve on those?
I'd say not a lot. The city is really good to work with when it comes to events and how we organize around it. We hear from the event organizers like the Tour of Alberta and the cycling race that's happening this weekend, or ITU World Triathlon, and they say this city bends over backwards versus most other places they go. So that's good. We have a couple challenges. The one is you take something like the algae bloom at Horlack Park this weekend that put in question a successful ITU World Triathlon. You can't get around those things. Those are going to happen anywhere. So that's not what I'm talking about. But what I'm talking about is what we don't have is a permanent event site. And a permanent event site is somewhere where you have asphalt and you have grass and you've got stadium and you've got concert space and all those things that allow you to just put in an event. It operates for a week, like Cavalia, or it could be a Indy car race, or it could be whatever you happen to do. We don't have that permanent event site, so we're always running around in this city trying to figure out: do we do it at Horlack Park? Do we do it at the River Valley? Do we do it at Northlands? Where do we put it?
Now, I think that when we had Cavalia, and when we had the Indy, it was at the airport lands. Downtown airport.
Indy was at the airport.
Yeah.
Cavalia, I think the first one, and then there was this other one, Odesso or something. I can't remember what the name was. That was out like on a highway or on Yellowhead or something like that. I can't remember, but
and we don't want people to see that.
We're moving these things around a little bit, and it's really tough for the city to organize around those things. Where next thing you know, you're having a car show at the Edmonton Research Park. Nice place, but we've never done a car show there, and so there's a huge opportunity for us to look at the future of Northlands. Horlack Park, and certainly the River Valley development for thinking about permanent event sites for how do we continue to do these things. Because Edmontonians love them, but also that huge catchment area I talked about, they love coming to Edmonton for those things. So the better we get at putting these on, the better we'll be as a city.
Is there another city example of what that catchment looks like?
There's a couple of European ones like Cologne and Hamburg. Melbourne in Australia is a good example where they have a very big catchment area, but everybody descends on this one city that is a little bit remote compared to other places, and it's not necessarily the big international destination, but it's a very big regional catchment.
So what was downtown like for you when you came back for university, and compared to now, what's that difference for you?
So I came back in about '87, which a few people here weren't born then, but I'll fast forward even like about 5 or 6 more years. And it was interesting because it's almost a precursor of what I'm doing today. I got invited to a roundtable discussion at Government House. It was about, somewhere around 98 or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the year was. Maybe it was 2000, I can't remember. But Alan Scott was the president of EEDC at the time. Great guy, huge Edmontonian, just a lover of life and a great leader. And the Minister of Economic Development was a guy named Mark Norris, so it might probably have been around 2000. And they put together this group at Government House talking about downtown renaissance. That was the name. I didn't like the name, but I remember getting this like PowerPoint, early stage PowerPoint kind of printout, and it was downtown renaissance, and they were talking about all the different parking lots. And
renaissance was just another buzzword at the time. It was a replacement for revitalization.
Exactly.
It meant the exact same thing.
Exactly. But it was good. It was the first time, and a whole bunch of Edmonton community leaders came together, and they were all bitching about how we had all these surface parking lots that were dirt. The dirt would get kicked up and everything like that. So that was, let's say, 2000. It might have been 99. I can't remember. And you fast forward 10 years, and in 10 years, you have a significant amount of development downtown. And a lot of it was just early condo stuff and a couple little, apartment blocks. And we had a new, art gallery. You had, a couple iconic kind of buildings starting to come up in the downtown. And people said, you know what? Downtown still sucks. Well, they did. It was like, so that was 2000, let's say 8, 2009. Still sucks. Fast forward 6 more years. You've got 3 new office towers. You've got 2 new hotels. You've got 2 more access points to the river valley. You've got 2 educational facilities. You've got, 13 new condos going up, and there's still a whole bunch of people going, oh, downtown still sucks, right? But you have to realize how much movement and how much growth has happened over the last 20 years. It's been a monumental change to downtown. But what we have in the ground today, and the projects that have been approved, and the shovels that are in the ground, I can promise you, Omar, you are not going to recognize your downtown 8 years from now. It is, again, going to be a monumental shift of just people's mindset as to what this downtown looked like. And you're going to see more hotels, and you're going to see more office towers, you're going to see more condo places, even though we go through a little lull here over the next 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's all happened in the days of $140 a barrel of oil, but now it is $38 a barrel.
42.38 today.
All right, 42.38.
You pessimist.
I bet you have an app that every single morning it tells you the price of the barrel of oil. Do you? Do you have that app?
I certainly do.
I bet you do.
And I wake up.
And the news came today. Surprising absolutely nobody who hasn't been in a coma for the last 9 months that we're in a recession in Canada, in Alberta. Surely that's got to take a lot of the glow off Oil City. I mean, what's going to happen with all these luxury development coming soon signs? Has this started to slow down downtown in any respect that you've noticed?
It's interesting. The AAA class building that's being built now, so I'll call that AAA class, the new stuff coming on.
What's an example of that?
So the Kelly Ramsey building, or the new Stantec Tower, or the city's towers, those are actually quite nicely leased up. They're doing a great job in terms of the leasing. However, similar to 1982 when Commerce Place came on, Commerce Place, that's not necessarily enabled by net new demand. So what we've done is we've vacated a lot of B and C class office space here. So we have a huge incentive right now. And a lot of that B and C class, the prices will start probably coming down to get quite competitive. So hopefully people out in the, companies out in the suburbs, places like that, start to relocate downtown, because it's going to be certainly at a cost incentive in order to come in the downtown core. So we're going to, I don't expect a lot of new cranes going in the ground here over the next 3 years, to tell you the truth. I think we're going to go through a real lull, and I think what we have is going to keep us growing and keep things quite prosperous here over the next 3 years. So we're going to go through a little lull, and as we backfill that B and C class space and new capital expenditures are putting those buildings, fixing them up, and making them competitive again. And so it will probably be about 8 more years before we start seeing this next wave of boom again. And the next wave of boom will come. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier, which is at the end of the day, what we have the world still wants, which is a lot of energy product, a lot of agricultural product, a lot of forestry, a lot of education, a lot of healthcare, quality of life. And that'll continue to drive population growth here over the long period of time. And we're a hardworking town, and people want to be located here.
As the CEO of the EEDC, surely you talk to business owners, surely you talk to the business community in downtown. What are they telling you are their concerns?
So first and foremost, I would suggest there's a great deal of concern around uncertainty and public policy right now. And that's not just provincially, because we're missing a budget and we're missing a lot of policy directions coming out of the province right now. And that'll get rectified by the end of October, early November. But we also are, we're moving into
the end of October. Why? What is happening in October that would possibly rectify that?
Let's follow along with the next piece of uncertainty, which is we have a federal election in October. And so we just have this massively uncertain policy environment right now, which has a lot of CEOs sitting on the sidelines trying to determine, do I keep my staff? Do I let my staff go? Because I don't know if we're going to build 50 schools, 100 schools, 150 schools next year. And without that kind of direction that comes from a budget and comes from procurement policy out of governments, people have to make decisions today. So that's the number one thing that's on CEOs' minds, is that uncertainty. The second, if I moved it to downtown, it would be around some of the transient community and a growing concern around safety in the downtown. And that really is located in about 4 or 5 areas that a lot of questionable behavior starts to occur, and that's everything from drug deals to, small street crimes to things like that.
A lot of that's been happening for a long time, over a decade. Yeah. Is it just a matter of the fact that downtown's revitalizing now?
No, actually, so when you look at this economic thing that Edmonton's going through, it's also happening in Fort McMurray and Grand Prairie and Fort St. John. And as people become unemployed in those places, they decant out of those cities and they come into Edmonton. We're the catchment area for a lot of people that are going through hardship right now, because they come, and that's where we have the social services here. We have some of the support mechanisms, and people can't find those on day one. So you create these pockets that are starting to become bigger pockets in the downtown right now. So it's a concern. It's not something that we all like to talk about, but I'll tell you, we have to talk about it because it prevents quality of life, safety, security in our downtown, and it's something that we need to escalate up as a real issue affecting the city right now. So that'd be the second thing. Do you want a third?
Sure, let's take it.
So probably a third thing that the businesses are worried about right now is still our cost structure. So as we increase taxes, we increase minimum wage, we increase, a lot of costs associated with doing businesses. There isn't downward pressure on wages right now. So what you have is a typical business owner that's not making enough or as much money as they did this year, not just because of economic conditions, but just the hard cost of doing business. So the opportunity of them to open up second location or a third location, they're just taking off the map right now. And as the next, I'd say about 3 years, it's going to take for us to kind of weed through this before we understand what the cost structures are in this province and how do I operate my business profitably. Then you're going to see a lot of money sitting on the sidelines before it gets reinvested back in the community. So the faster we can get to security around some of those, policy issues, things like that, the faster we can get onto a growth environment here, even though the price of oil is quite low.
I mean, some people would probably say that is favorable toward business interests more than, than social interests.
But you need to make money to spend money, Omar. So the business interest has to be of paramount concern all the time. Without a growth environment in the business, there is no money to spend on other things.
Would I hear from one of the concerns I hear from when I speak to especially the smaller downtown businesses, usually in retail, usually in hospitality, is that the rapid arrival of a new downtown district, that being the ICE district, will siphon business from Jasper Avenue and from these parts of downtown that are just kind of turning in the last decade. Is that something that you ever hear?
It's interesting. I look at the geographic focus. So if you think of like gravity, what's the center of gravity in downtown? And I think back in 1940 or whatever, it was probably Jasper 101, and in 1980 it was probably still Jasper 101. We started to move that a little bit northbound over the last while, and I became quite concerned a year ago, but maybe about a year and a half ago, when we started talking about the Galleria project and a couple others that really push things north, that geographic center starts to move quite unnaturally north, where it's not a natural progression. There's a mega project that pulls it, and
there's no Main Street there either.
Well, yeah, it can't be built out as quickly as a project can. It has to happen over time. So you end up moving that artificially, that geographic center. So the movement right now, moving a little bit from Jasper Avenue towards that ICE district, I think is fine, because it kind of rides that 104th, 103rd Street mechanism that we have in place. It allow for Jasper Avenue rents to not be lowered, but certainly opportunities for some creativity and some repurposing of some older buildings in Jasper Avenue, and allows people to rethink and get creative around what we could do there. You're going to get shared spaces, you're going to get lots of creative uses, pop-up retail, all those things. I think what's really going to be interesting is when we start to activate the stuff between the towers, so the back alleys, with pop-ups and, Could be pop-up cafes or pop-up bars, things like that, that could really activate the spaces between, let's say, 104th Street and 105th Street, or 104th Street and 103rd Street. We've never themed 103rd Street. We've never themed 105th Street. These are huge opportunities for us to start to link the Ice District with Jasper Avenue if we do it smartly.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that that is very, and not necessarily in a good way, unique about Edmonton's downtown is it's very linear. It's one straight line, Jasper Avenue, and you just follow that. And when you get off of it, things start to change pretty quickly. Whereas if you go to other cities' downtowns, it's a little bit more of a grid, right? It's a little bit more locked into these interspersing streets. So I think it could maybe in the end actually be a very positive thing to bring some of that flow northward in those in between streets. I have to ask, because it is, I don't know how long we'll be talking about the Ice District as the Ice District name and the different districts that are now emerging around downtown, but it seems to be pretty unique to downtown. So we have Ice District, we have the Brewery District, we have the Arts District. Kelly Ramsey's playing with the Financial District. Norquest is lobbying the name of the Education District. Does it help? Does it make any impact at all? Does it potentially isolate these corners as business clusters? Could it at all be a hindrance if we stop talking about the strengths of downtown as a whole and start to divvy it up in these little districts? Is that even something to care about?
Yeah, I think it's temporary. A lot of it is based on the need to differentiate and market yourself for investors coming in. For the Cates Group to go out and be or WAM to go out and be marketing the Ice District as this area that is all about entertainment and all that captures a potential investor's mind in terms of, oh, I want to be there. This is what I want to do. And I'd say the Financial District did the exact same thing. What I like about it is we're not government district and government district and government district anymore. We actually have some differentiation of what we want to do downtown. So I'm all supportive of, short-term need. But really, if you look at the geographic space, we're dealing with about 22 square city blocks. Eventually, it's just downtown.
It's all one. It's the downtown district. And a lot of these districts overlap with each other.
And if we program it properly, it's just downtown. And people will start to explore between districts. Right now, you drive to a building, you park downstairs, you get up, you do your business, or you go to a restaurant, and then you get in your car and you go home. What we want to do is we want people to be coming, they explore one district, they walk, and they're curious. What's around the next corner? What's down this alley? What's over here? Let's stop at this coffee shop, or over for this drink, or whatever it happens to be. And then next thing you know, we're in the music district. Do we have a music district?
Do we have a music district?
We need a music district.
All right, let's build a music district.
So, actually, we need music generally.
Yeah, that would be nice, actually.
Right? So, that's where this is going. So I wouldn't get too concerned about being in the current state, where it's all about differentiation and just attention. But eventually, we're just going to be one big downtown, and it'll be a lot of fun.
So before we go to the Q&A and the audience questions, I wanted to ask you this, because I know your job, like mine, partly asks for you to be encouraging, to be a booster of downtown Edmonton. And you yourself have said optimism is a key virtue of living here. And I agree with that. But I also know you're not shy to say things that piss people off. If the blog about the NDP's reluctance to table a budget, from which I pulled that very quote, is any evidence. So let's take our booster hats off a moment. And each of us share one thing that if we could change it tomorrow about downtown, whoop, swoop, magic wand, it's changed. We could. And I'll go first. I would love it if City Center Mall, instead of that blank facade that you see when you walk around it, all those closed doors, if they would just open those doors and had some frontage retail spaces that you could walk into those stores right off the sidewalk. I think it's such a small but make a huge significant change to the walkability and overall design and feel of downtown.
Yeah, I like that one. Actually, when you asked me the question, I was pausing and kind of thinking through different things. And as soon as you said that, I was like, yeah, it's probably one of the most biggest visible things we could do is take a good look at that particular area, if I was to say it politely. if I had to answer, though, the question, which I guess I do because I'm on stage and I have a mic.
Yeah, you're forced to.
is,
You're legally obliged.
We carve up our downtown. And it's all these BRZs, these business revitalization zones or districts or whatever they're called. And one is against the other, and then you've got the Oliver one, you've got downtown, you've got all these things. Really, it's, we take probably from about 97th through to 124th Street, and from the river, meaning like the river, all the way to, let's say, just 105th for the time being, or maybe 107th for the time being. We could say that's downtown. I'd love to see a little bit of more of an amorphous look to our downtown, because then we would talk about it differently in the real living areas and play areas and work areas and all those types of things would start to merge. But one of the things is on the south boundary, this thing called the river, which we've always said downtown starts above the riverbank and the river is down here and we can't touch it. It's sometime in my life, and I'm hoping to live a little longer than I have, is we need to find access points into the river and activate it, not in one big commercial strip, but you have these opportunities for these nodes to do something uniquely Edmonton that allows us to interact with our river valley, allow people to 10 times more to be exploring down there and really appreciate it, and to do it in a respectful nature and conservational, but at the same time some commercial environment that allows for people to play and have fun and interact with it.
I completely agree with you. And when I do, it upsets a lot of people. Why do you think people are so sensitive about development in the River Valley, why it is so sacred? Because that seems to be pretty uniquely Edmonton. Most other cities that have that kind of a natural and urban resource, they do build things there.
Yeah. We get caught in the way we think about things, and once a mind is stretched in a new dimension, it can't really retake its original form. And once more and more people see how other cities have activated the river valley, and they realize that it can be done really respectfully. There are some examples where it's not done respectfully.
Please say San Antonio as an example of
that was more of a canal system, wasn't it?
Yeah,
not necessarily
okay.
the river valley, but
it's the one that people like to cite.
Yeah,
and I don't think it's an appropriate example.
Neither do I. But if we can do some nodes that allow people to move between nodes, snowshoe between nodes, and cross-country ski and rollerblade and run and bike and all those things between nodes, but occasionally you have this opportunity for people to sit down and buy a coffee or have a dinner or whatever it happens to be and hear some music and just kind of enjoy things. That type of approach to our river valley would just allow more and more people to interact with it. It would allow downtown to interact with it and allow us to, do things after hours, do things on weekends, things like that encourage more festivals and events and all those things that move people throughout the city. So, when it comes down to the one thing I still want to crack, and it's not my responsibility, but, in my lifetime, I'd like to see our river valley done in a way that is aesthetically pleasing to the eye and to the experience, but at the same time is allow people to reach into their pockets and buy a coffee and have some fun.
Brad, thank you, and thank you all for coming.